In a significant diplomatic move, Russian President Vladimir Putin is dispatching his top negotiator Kirill Dmitriev to Washington amid escalating tensions surrounding peace negotiations related to the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict. The visit comes at a time when U.S. officials, including President Donald Trump, express frustration over what they perceive as Moscow's reluctance to engage in serious talks. Dmitriev, who has a background rooted in Kyiv and an education from U.S. institutions, is expected to meet with Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to address various topics including potential paths to peace, the return of U.S. businesses to Russia, and energy prices. Dmitriev himself acknowledged the challenges of fostering U.S.-Russia dialogue, stating, "The resistance to U.S.-Russia dialogue is real, driven by entrenched interests and old narratives. But what if improved relations are exactly what the world needs for lasting global security and peace?" This diplomatic overture follows Trump's candid remarks about his frustrations with Putin, who he claims has stalled efforts to secure a ceasefire in Ukraine. Trump was quoted as saying he felt off with the Russian leader and suggested he might impose tariffs on Russian oil if the negotiations do not progress. The U.S. Senate has responded in kind with a bipartisan coalition proposing sanctions against Russia should it fail to engage in good faith negotiations with Ukraine. Despite these developments, U.S. officials remain skeptical about the immediate prospects for a peace deal. Reports indicate that the talks may not bear fruit in the near term, with the situation on the ground remaining volatile. Ukraine and Russia have exchanged accusations of violating a temporary ceasefire agreement specifically concerning attacks on energy infrastructure, which both sides had previously agreed to halt. The conflict continues to escalate, with both sides reporting new offensives and civilian casualties. A recent Russian missile strike on Kryvyi Rih resulted in 3 fatalities, further complicating the atmosphere of negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been vocal about Russia's ongoing attacks on energy facilities, emphasizing that such actions undermine the potential for a peaceful resolution. In this context, the Kremlin's demands for the elimination of what it terms the root causes of the conflict remain a sticking point. Russian officials argue that NATO's expansion and perceived violations of Russian-speaking minorities' rights in Ukraine must be addressed before any peace agreement can be reached. This narrative, however, contradicts Trump's desire for a ceasefire that would lead to a lasting peace, indicating a significant diplomatic chasm. As Dmitriev prepares for his meeting in Washington, the geopolitical landscape remains fraught with tension and the future of U.S.-Russia relations hangs in the balance. The outcome of these discussions could have far-reaching implications not only for the conflict in Ukraine but also for the broader geopolitical order. In conclusion, as the situation unfolds, all eyes will be on the forthcoming diplomatic exchanges. The potential for renewed dialogue, however fraught, could either pave the way for peace or further entrench the hostilities that have defined this conflict for over 3 years. The coming days will be critical in determining whether a diplomatic resolution is achievable or if the cycle of violence will continue unabated. In a significant diplomatic maneuver, Russian President Vladimir Putin is dispatching his top negotiator, Kirill Dmitriev, to Washington amid rising frustration in the United States over stalled peace talks concerning the ongoing war in Ukraine. This development comes as the Biden administration and members of Congress express increasing impatience with Moscow's reluctance to engage constructively in negotiations. Reports indicate that Dmitriev, who has a background rooted in Kyiv and extensive connections in the U.S., will meet with Steve Witkoff, the special envoy for the Middle East, this week. Dmitriev's mission is particularly timely as U.S. officials have acknowledged that Putin is resisting calls for a ceasefire. Sources suggest that discussions regarding potential economic or diplomatic penalties aimed at compelling Russia to negotiate are underway. This follows a recent outburst from former President Donald Trump, who expressed his discontent with Putin's handling of the peace process, stating he is pissed off and hinting at the imposition of oil tariffs on Russia if sincere negotiations do not materialize. In a statement on social media, Dmitriev noted the resistance to U.S.-Russia dialogue is real, driven by entrenched interests and old narratives.
But what if improved relations are exactly what the world needs for lasting global security and peace?
However, despite such overtures, U.S. officials have indicated that a peace deal remains elusive, with many believing that a resolution is not on the immediate horizon.
The backdrop to this diplomatic engagement is a series of recent military escalations.
Both Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of violating a limited truce aimed at halting attacks on energy infrastructure. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called attention to Russia's recent drone strikes that targeted energy facilities, while Russian officials reported Ukrainian assaults that disrupted power in their regions. The ongoing exchanges of accusations highlight the fragile nature of any agreements brokered by the United States. As the diplomatic scene unfolds, the U.S. Senate is also taking action. A bipartisan group of 50 senators, 25 from each party, has come together to propose sanctions against Russia should it fail to engage in good faith negotiations. This initiative underscores a growing consensus in Washington that stronger measures may be necessary to hold Moscow accountable for its actions. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground remains dire.
Reports indicate that Russian missile strikes recently killed civilians in Kryvyi Rih, prompting further calls for accountability.
As military actions continue, the humanitarian crisis deepens, creating a complex and urgent backdrop for any potential diplomatic solutions. The geopolitical implications of these developments are profound. Analysts suggest that Trump's recent focus on tariffs and economic measures against Russia could significantly impact U.S.-Russia relations as well as global economic stability. The Russian central bank has warned that such tariffs may decelerate global growth and increase inflation, reflecting the interconnectedness of international markets and the potential fallout from U.S. policy decisions. Looking ahead, the upcoming meeting between Dmitriev and Witkoff will be scrutinized for any signs of progress.
The stakes are high not only for Russia and Ukraine but also for U.S. foreign policy and its role in global diplomacy.
As the war drags on, the prospect of a lasting peace remains uncertain, with entrenched interests on both sides complicating the path forward. The world watches closely, hopeful for a breakthrough but wary of the entrenched narratives that continue to fuel the conflict. In a significant diplomatic maneuver reflecting the ongoing complexities of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin is dispatching his top negotiator Kirill Dmitriev to Washington. This move comes at a time when tensions between the U.S. and Russia are palpable, particularly following remarks from former President Donald Trump expressing frustration with Putin over stalled peace negotiations in Ukraine. As the situation unfolds, the implications of this envoy's visit could reverberate through international relations and the ongoing war. Dmitriev, who was born in Kyiv and educated in the United States, holds a unique position that may facilitate dialogue between the two nations. Scheduled to meet with Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff this week, Dmitriev aims to address a range of topics, including the possibility of reviving U.S. business interests in Russia, energy prices, and potential prisoner swaps. The resistance to U.S. Russia dialogue is real, driven by entrenched interests and old narratives, Dmitriev noted on social media, suggesting that improved relations could be essential for global security. However, the current climate in Washington indicates skepticism regarding the potential for a swift resolution to the conflict. Reports from U.S. officials suggest that peace talks are unlikely to yield immediate results, with half of the U.S. Senate comprising an equal number of Republicans and Democrats proposing sanctions against Russia should it fail to engage in meaningful negotiations with Ukraine. This bipartisan support highlights the growing impatience in Congress regarding Russia's actions and the urgency for a definitive ceasefire. The backdrop to these diplomatic efforts is marked by ongoing military hostilities. Recent attacks have seen both sides trading accusations over strikes on energy infrastructure, a violation of a tentative agreement brokered by the U.S. Both Russia and Ukraine have reported new assaults with significant damage inflicted on civilian facilities. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has vocalized concerns about Russia's violations, emphasizing that the lack of adherence to ceasefire proposals stems from Moscow's intransigence. We insist that every such violation must be documented and receive a response from our partners, Zelensky stated, underscoring the need for accountability in the diplomatic process. As the conflict continues, the humanitarian toll remains high. Reports indicate that a recent Russian missile attack on Kryvyi Rih resulted in civilian casualties, further intensifying calls for a ceasefire and negotiations. The U.S. administration under Trump's leadership has expressed dissatisfaction with both Kyiv and Moscow, demanding a more proactive approach to ending the nearly 3-year-long war. The arrival of Dmitriev in Washington may serve as a litmus test for the resilience of U.S.-Russia relations, especially in light of Trump's recent frustrations. Analysts suggest that Trump's apparent anger towards Putin could be a strategic ploy reflecting a complex interplay of diplomacy and domestic politics. Trump's anger at Putin over Ukraine peace deal delay is just play acting, writes Sam Kiley, a World Affairs editor, suggesting that the dynamics may be more performative than substantive. As international observers await the outcomes of Dmitriev's meetings, the situation remains fluid, with the potential for both escalated conflict and renewed dialogue. The next steps taken by both the Kremlin and Washington will be crucial in shaping the future of Ukraine and the broader geopolitical landscape. With NATO countries pledging over €20 billion in military support to Ukraine this year, the stakes are undeniably high and the path to peace remains fraught with challenges. The world watches closely, hoping for a breakthrough that could eventually lead to stability in the region. In a significant move to bolster Ukraine's defense amidst ongoing hostilities, President Volodymyr Zelensky has articulated specific requests for military assistance from allied nations. As the conflict with Russia continues to escalate, the Ukrainian leader's call for support underscores the urgent need for international cooperation to stabilize the region. Zelensky's remarks come ahead of a crucial meeting scheduled for this Friday, where military teams from Ukraine and a select group of allied countries will convene to discuss potential peacekeeping missions. During a briefing on Tuesday, Zelensky stated there will be a meeting of our military teams of several countries, a narrow circle of countries, those who will be ready to deploy a contingent in one form or another. He emphasized the importance of these discussions being grounded in Ukraine's prepared proposals, which aim to outline the specific roles that allied forces could play in a peacekeeping capacity. The Ukrainian president detailed 3 primary missions for allied nations: deploying ground troops utilizing air power to patrol the skies over Ukraine and sending naval vessels to monitor activities in the Black Sea. This strategic appeal reflects a broader initiative led by the United Kingdom and France, spearheading a coalition of 30 countries committed to enhancing military support for Ukraine. Following a coalition meeting on March 27, French President Emmanuel Macron announced a joint French-British mission aimed at strengthening the Ukrainian military, which is set to commence operations soon. However, Zelensky's proposals also highlight the underlying divisions among allied countries regarding troop deployment. Despite the growing consensus on providing military aid, significant hesitations remain about sending forces directly into Ukraine, a complex issue that has been a point of contention among NATO members and other potential allies. As the landscape of international military support evolves, Zelensky's push for clarity and commitment from allied nations is increasingly critical. He has consistently reiterated that sustained pressure on Russia is necessary to encourage a ceasefire and eventual peace negotiations. In his recent statements, he remarked against this backdrop, speaking about easing pressure on Russia, lifting sanctions, and so on, is definitely inappropriate and unhelpful. This perspective reflects Ukraine's insistence on holding Russia accountable for its actions while simultaneously seeking avenues for de-escalation through international cooperation. The dynamics of this situation are further complicated by evolving geopolitical factors, including the ongoing narrative around Russian President Vladimir Putin's health and stability. Amidst speculation about the Kremlin's internal challenges, Zelensky's administration remains cautious yet hopeful that mounting international pressure may eventually compel Russia to consider a ceasefire. As the upcoming military meeting approaches, the outcomes could potentially reshape the trajectory of both Ukraine's defense capabilities and the international response to the conflict.
With Zelensky at the helm, Ukraine continues to navigate these tumultuous waters, seeking to unify support while remaining steadfast in its commitment to sovereignty and peace.
The coming weeks will likely reveal not only the strength of international alliances but also the resilience of Ukraine's resolve in the face of adversity.